Will the Bengals add a piece as they try to make their playoff push with the trade deadline looming? Hi again, everyone. I'm James Rapien with allbengals.com and Cincinnati Bengals Talk. And let's be honest, I get it. It's really hard to recover from what took place at the Meadowlands. The New York Jets beat your Cincinnati Bengals 34-31, but you got to move quick. And the Bengals got to move quick. Not only do they host the Cleveland Browns on Sunday, and let's be honest, they're still in fifth place in the AFC, still in line to make the playoffs following that loss, but it hurts, right? That loss hurts. And so I understand that. I get that. But let's talk about the trade deadline, because the trade deadline is Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, and the Bengals should absolutely make a move. If anything, the loss to the Jets is a reminder that they need pieces, that they haven't arrived yet. And whether it's the number of snaps that defense have played, the lack of snaps for an offense, they could use pieces on both sides of the ball. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over some scenarios. We're going to start with the realistic scenarios. Then I'm going to throw some names that might not move the meter for you or me, but could make a difference. And then some dream scenarios that, let's be honest, probably won't happen, but you might as well have a little fun at the trade deadline. And we're all about fun here at Cincinnati Bengals Talk. So let's start with the realistic scenarios. And I have some names written down here, and it's been a collection really over the past couple of weeks where if I see a name or if I hear rumblings on the back end or anything like that, I'm going to write them down on my trusty notepad here. And the first one is the Bengals' biggest weakness, the interior of the Bengals' offensive line. And there's a guy in Kansas City who hasn't played at all this season because Creed Humphrey, the rookie out of Oklahoma that, man, if the Bengals would have drafted, would have fit in well on this interior of the offensive line, kind of took the job from him. And he has a history. His name's Austin Blythe. Has a history with Zach Taylor from his days with the Rams. Was a former 7th-round pick of the Colts, but is a guy who can play center and guard. And I look at the Bengals, and they have all 7 of their draft picks. Plus, they could get a conditional 7th-round pick in that Billy Price for B.J. Hill deal when they ripped off the Giants. And they could still get a compensatory selection for John Ross. It's kind of dependent on Ross and what he does in New York, since they signed a bunch of guys and let a bunch of guys walk. So we'll see. But the Bengals could have more than their 7 draft picks in 2022. You don't want to send a 7th to Kansas City or a 6th to Kansas City for a guy like Austin Blythe, a proven veteran who can play both spots. We don't know about Jackson Carman's injury. Probably we'll learn a little bit more on Monday. But Blythe has played right guard, which is the hole that you need to fill at some point here. And worst case, he's a backup that can be at least serviceable if Jackson Carman is okay and is healthy. And he does give you some leeway if Trey Hopkins, doesn't bounce back. They need something on the interior because that's why they can't sustain drives. They need to be able to sustain drives. They need to be able to run the ball with the game on the line, but they also need to be able to keep Joe Burrow clean when a rookie offensive lineman goes down. And they couldn't do that on Sunday. Austin Blythe would help them do that. Clelin Ferrell is another guy that the Bengals should target. And to me, you're talking about a first rounder, a guy who is from his Clemson days familiar with Marion Hobby and has worked with Marion Hobby, the Bengals defensive line coach. And shout out to my guy Charlie at the Enquirer, Charlie Goldsmith, because he was the one who pointed out the Hobby connection. I didn't even think about that. I've had Ferrell in my radar, as a lot of YouTube channels are going to talk about a potential trade candidate. Only has 3 tackles this year, but certainly someone that the Bengals could target because he's a first-round talent. And again, if you put him in the right situation, maybe reunite him with Marion Hobby for a late-round pick, it could work out. Next couple, to me, you might not think it's a need, but I think it's a borderline need, especially when you look at this offense and the snap difference between CJ Uzomah and then what Drew Sample's doing. And if they could go get an Evan Engram, a guy who's got enters Sunday with 20 receptions, 171 yards, or a Hayden Hurst, 18 receptions, 142 yards and a touchdown, either one of those guys is an upgrade. Now, those are pass-catching tight ends. Well, that's great because you know what Joe Burrow likes to do? Throw it to his tight end. And if you can get them for a late round pick, like if you're the Falcons, you have Kyle Pitts. You're not really, do you need Hayden Hurst? Are you willing to take a 6th rounder for him? Like you might be willing to. And if you're the Bengals, another weapon on offense certainly makes sense, because sometimes it gets a little stagnant on offense. And I don't know, exactly why. I don't think it's necessarily Burrow's fault, but just so you know, as far as snap counts go on Sunday, they played 3 wide receivers the majority of the game. They played CJ Uzama a ton, Joe Mixon a ton. But after that, with Auden Tate out, they didn't play any other receivers more than 7 snaps. It's not like Samaje Perine is going to be a world beater at running back. Like it gets a little thin there. And so that's something that I would at least consider adding, depending on what the asking price is for either of those 2 tight ends. And then some other guys. And again, these are players that could help them, because the 2 weaknesses, the Bengals' 2 biggest weaknesses, interior offensive line, edge rush. And if they can add either or both, like if they could get Blythe and Ferrell, that to me would be a home run trade deadline. And you might be able to do it for late day 3 picks, right? Maybe a 7th rounder in 2023 for Clelin Ferrell. Like, I think that might be a little optimistic, but you never know. You really don't. You never know. Heck, remember, Billy Price was traded for BJ Hill and a conditional 7th round pick. We don't know those conditions, by the way, but some other names I'll throw out there. Zach Bond, outside linebacker for the Saints. They may try to move him. He's been passed up in the pecking order. And look, if the Bengals liked him a couple of years ago in the 2020 draft, maybe you do it. Maybe you say, oh, well, this is a guy that we didn't get to draft because we took T. Higgins, right? And we really liked Logan Wilson, and they got it right with those guys. But we passed on him, but we really like Bond. And if we can get him for pennies on the dollar or a dime on the dollar, you do it. So that's one with the Saints, where the Saints gave up multiple draft picks to move up to take Bond, and he's been passed in the pecking order. Jerry Hughes, and really any of these Buffalo Bills defensive ends, they got Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison, guys like that. If they're willing to part with one of them, you certainly make the call, because they have a plethora of defensive ends and defensive linemen. And if you could just add one more piece, right? Khalid Kareem, you were wondering if that was, if it was going to be, that was going to be the piece, right? He comes back, he makes his debut against the Jets, and he only had 12 snaps. And, you didn't really notice him, did you? I know I didn't. And they played 84 snaps, so there's a lot of snaps in there, but I didn't see an impact. And it was his first game back, and he may have an impact, but this is a way to add another body and potentially do that. Another member of the Saints, Carl Graterson, is someone that I saw mentioned in an article, and I'm like, okay, well, what's he got? He doesn't have great numbers, but if you can add another depth piece that can get some pressure, it's going to make things easier. And me personally, Ferrell and Bond, they have higher round pedigrees. Those are the 2 that I would be interested in of the names I've seen out there. But look, they have plenty of options. There are guys that they're going to talk about at Paul Brown Stadium that I'm not going to mention. And you're probably going to see written somewhere. I'm going to write an article, by the way, at allbengals.com by the time you see this video, where there's more in-depth, where we go in-depth and potential targets. But let's get to these dream scenarios, because all those are like realistic. They might not move the meter for you. And there's really no split there. Like, you might remember Zach Bond from the draft, or you might not. You might think, well, who's this guy? Clelin Ferrell was drafted high, but is he really going to make an impact? I don't know, maybe. And that's why you might be able to get him for a reasonable low price. For the dream scenarios, I think a lot of you are talking about Xavier Howard, and I get it. I do. I'm not giving up a 1st round pick for Xavier Howard. I'm just not. Now, if they want to give up a 2nd and a 4th, and you can get him, because you're going to have to pay him, right? And so if you're adding a guy like that, and he's really, really good, I understand that. You already have, and I know Chidobe Awuzie didn't play well on Sunday, but you already have a guy you feel like is a cornerback 1. It's tough. It's tough. I just don't think it's realistic. But the dream scenario, I understand it, because in your mind, you're like, okay, they're going to have this lockdown cornerback on one side. You're going to have Awuzie on the other, and Mike Hilton in the slot. And then if Trey Waynes comes back for the rest of the year, because you're not going to be able to trade Trey Waynes You basically have to pay him his entire salary, even if you dealt him or released him or anything like that. So there's no way you can get cap flexibility there. But the one edge that the Bengals do have, they have over $9 million in cap space. So they have the 9th most in the league. And there aren't many teams that are going to be willing to make a deal like that. So, we'll see. There's a chance, right? There's a chance. Never say never. The other one I would throw out there is Von Miller. And Von Miller is a guy who I think is still got something left. And I think the Bengals feel like he's got something left. But will the Broncos be willing to trade for him? That's the question mark. And will they be able to make it work cap space wise? And he's a free agent to be. So how much are you giving up? And so those are the two dream huge name scenarios that I don't think are realistic. Xavier Howard and Von Miller. That being said, I'll throw another name out there. And this is kind of just like a fun, silly thing. What about Deshaun Jackson? And no, I don't think they should necessarily go after Deshaun Jackson or give up a future asset for Deshaun Jackson. But I just said that the Bengals' top 3 receivers played the majority of the snaps. I think so. They had 56 snaps on Sunday, and Chase played 53. Higgins played, and I'm doing this off of memory, but I think I'm right. Higgins played 45 of them, and then Tyler Boyd played 43. No one else played more than 7. Part of that was the personnel they were running and everything like that. But you're telling me you can't find a way to get Deshaun Jackson the ball in space or push the ball down the field to Deshaun Jackson here or there. That way, if teams are double teaming Jamar Chase, you have another field stretcher. Or if they are trying to shadow T. Higgins, you have another field stretcher. I don't know, because he's unhappy with his role with the Rams, and it might be similar, right, where you're just kind of a compliment to everybody else. But if he gets released, and that's the report, is that he could get released, could I be interested? Could you convince me to take that on? Maybe. Now, a lot of you are going to say, man, that's a headache. And that's the other part of this, is the chemistry part of the trade deadline. And I totally get it, understand it. I think most of these guys would fit right in. And Deshaun Jackson, the one thing I think that could get it to work, or one guy that I think could get it to work, would be a guy like Joe Burrow, who's just a leader, right? He's just that dude, and the culture they have, and it's a selfish culture. Now, that being said, would I rather have Austin Blythe or Clelin Ferrell or honestly probably anybody on this list, Evan Engram or Hayden Hurst for the offense? I think they would help more than a Deshaun Jackson. That's why I didn't mention trading a piece for him. But if he's just out there, could he be your wide receiver 4 or 5 and stretch the field? Absolutely he could. Would he be willing to do that? Who knows? Maybe he just doesn't like that Los Angeles weather. Zach Bond, Jerry Hughes. I mean, there are a lot of guys. So if they're available, those guys. But I think Farrell's available. I think Ingram's available. I think Hurst is available, and Blythe are available. So those are the 4 targets that, to me, especially Blythe, if you could get Blythe, and it stinks, but like, what's going to derail this team? Like when you're at the water cooler at work, what is it? You're like, well, if the offensive line holds up, or if they can get after the passer. Well, those are 2 things that they could not do or did not do in critical moments against the Jets that they have to do moving forward if they're going to make the playoffs. So who are your trade targets? Who do you want the Bengals to go after? Let me know. Sound off, and you can do so by commenting here. Hit that subscribe button here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk. And look, we're going to have you covered after the trade deadline. It's 4 p.m. Tuesday. So if the Bengals make a move, well, just log on to Cincinnati Bengals Talk. We're going to have the latest news, latest reaction, and so much more. I think they should make a move. Do you? Or are you worried about chemistry? I've seen some fans say, I don't want them to make a move. I do. I think you send a message to the locker room that, hey, this is the time. This is our time. This is what we plan on doing. We plan on winning, and we're going to add every piece we can to the puzzle to make sure that works. And by the way, I will throw out there, I wonder if they would entertain trade offers for Darius Phillips. Played 1 defensive snap on Sunday and is basically a punt returner. They may say, no, we like our cornerback depth, and that's it. It might have just been happenstance. I don't know. But that's someone I'd throw out there. And then Auden Tate, a lot of you say free Auden Tate. Will any team be interested in him? I don't know. It's another guy you could see at least teams being intrigued with, right? A few weeks ago, I said they should leave him in Detroit and send him to Detroit so he can play there. So fans would be happy to see Auden Tate unleashed. Who knows? Maybe it'll happen. I don't think so, but maybe it'll happen. Either way, I think the Bengals should be buyers. They should go after someone in the trenches. Get some trench help, maybe on both sides. That would be ideal. Either way, we'll have you covered. Like I said, hit that subscribe button. For our editor and producer, Andrew Fox Miller, I'm James Rapien, signing off for now. As always, thank you so much for watching here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk.